So, hello everyone and welcome to another video. This time, for the first time, you'll be seeing the new test bench motherboard, the Z390 Gaming Pro Carbon from MSI in action. And what I've done is basically, essentially this is a reshoot of another video that I made on the old motherboard, where despite its glaring issues, I still tried to push the memory as far as it could go. In terms of performance, not frequency, which is why this is at 3800. Now the video didn't really turn out that great. It was very long and not very interesting, so I decided to reshoot it on the new motherboard at essentially the same settings. It's still 3800. This new motherboard, being a daisy chain, does go to higher frequencies. I haven't actually tested where it stops, but I was able to post 4100. The problem is just that I seem to be hitting the very limit of the memory sticks here, because 4100, no matter how much I loosened out the timings, it just wasn't stable. So I went to 3800 because 3800 is the last step before I had to significantly loosen out my primaries. So basically if I go 3866 I would go to 17, 20, 20, 30. But at 3800 I get to keep 16, 19, 19, 28, which on paper is better than I think even at 4000 with the looser timings. And I mean the performance you can see here. And I haven't done IDA 64 benchmark a lot, but from what I see here, I think this is pretty good, considering that, yeah. So like there's a thing with this benchmark. I ran this benchmark on the old motherboard as well, with very similar settings. There's a few more tweaks in the sub-timings here that I didn't have. Basically, I adjusted TCKE, and the TWTRs are also adjusted in this one. Other than that, these should be the exact same settings I ran on the Gigabyte board. And yeah, so in terms of latency, these are pretty much the same. Like, it floats around a bit. The best I got on this motherboard was just barely under 42 nanoseconds, and then on the Gigabyte board it was actually at 41.2 nanoseconds. So like a bit better, but that might also just be floating. But then for the read speed, yeah, so on the Gigabyte board, just with these 3 timings on auto instead of tightened down, I was getting 40 gigabytes read. Now I'm getting 56.7. I kind of have a hard time believing that these 3 timings being slightly lowered have that much of an impact. I think something was wrong with the old motherboard, because that result was reproducible. It wasn't just that it did that once. Like every single time I ran the benchmark, I was getting just over 40 gigabytes read. And this, every time I run it, I get like over 56. Also, the latencies stay pretty much consistent. So yeah, and I even used the same OS. Like, this is a different OS now. I ended up resetting it. Didn't really have a reason for it. I just wanted to figure out what the difference is between the compact and super light version of Ghost Spectre. The difference is you get to have a Microsoft account. Still no Microsoft Store. But yeah, the OS I previously had was the same I also had on the Gigabyte board. And it just randomly started giving me another 16 gigabytes of read. So yeah, that's pretty cool, I guess, for the new board, not for the old one. Yeah. Oh, one more thing that I adjusted is I set my Encore to 4.9 gigahertz. On the old one it was stock. That, I still think that doesn't do that much, does it? I don't know. Maybe at like higher memory speeds Encore can become a bottleneck, but I don't think so. Like, this is just a 6, like this is an 8700K. this doesn't have a big ring, so it shouldn't be super slow like it is on like a 10900K, as far as I understand it. Yeah, and then the CPU is at 5.2 gigahertz, but I think that shouldn't affect the speeds. Yeah, I did a test at 5.1 and 5.2, and the read speed didn't really change in any significant way. So, yeah. Apart from that, I guess we can look at the BIOS for this new board. Like, it's the first time I showed off working, so I guess we can take this chance to, yeah, take a look at the BIOS. Also, you might notice from the camera I'm holding it now instead of having it fixated. I have it on like an automated dongle though. Like, I'm not holding it with my hand. The smartphone is on a Xeon Smooth 4, which LTG once showed off if you want to know what it is. Anyway, so this is the BIOS, fairly standard MSI BIOS. I am quite familiar with this before having on this motherboard, because I had both an MSI B75 and B85 motherboard, which is a much older, much lower end board, but it still had essentially the same layout to its BIOS, just that it was blue and had less options. And then I also helped out a couple of friends with like memory and CPU overclocking who had this same BIOS on their boards. It's kind of funny, like if you look at, yeah, I think actually, no, there's one guy who has an aswell board, and I think everybody else I know either has a Gigabyte or MSI board. Funny. Yeah, so just generally what I think of the BIOS, I like it. So compared to the Gigabyte BIOS, this is quicker, it's more responsive. Also, it has proper mouse support. Like, it's still not, it still has a kind of a delay to it, but not as bad as on Gigabyte. And for the layout, well, it's different than Gigabyte. It has a different idea. So like the the old Gigabyte BIOS, I have to say. The new one is very similar to this, but the old one had like, you just got like 5 submenus, and then there's one for CPU, one for memory, one for like chipset, and then one for voltage. And the thing that a lot of people complained about is that when you want to change your vCore, you would have to go into the voltage menu, but when you want to change your memory timings or CPU settings, you have to go on the other menus. So you end up jumping submenus a lot. This doesn't really exist in this BIOS, though it still has a lot of, like, for example, like your VRM settings are in a submenu, your timings are in a submenu, and then there's these things, but like basically you still use these two submenus a lot. So you still end up submenu jumping. Also, like these right here, you could also call submenus that you have to click first. So the amount of button clicking that you end up doing is overall actually kind of similar to the Gigabyte BIOS. But I think the way how things are placed in this is more beginner or normie friendly than the Gigabyte one, because you don't have to like explore every single sub menu first. You just go to overclock and you see most of the most important things you see right away, and then all the other settings are just one sub menu away. So yeah, I like this idea more than the old Gigabyte BIOS, and apparently Gigabyte does too, because their new BIOS looks essentially the same as this. So yeah, and also they have like this, but I don't care about that. So yeah, I guess let's show some of the settings. So I enabled XMP, because there's an XMP adjusts some more things in the background, like I think these voltages, yeah, that's not stock. So XMP adjusts these. I can probably lower these and still be fine, but it's, yeah, these should not be too dangerous to run. So I just enabled XMP so I don't have to bother with like these things. And you can see the XMP spec of this kit right here. So this is a Hynix CJR kit, 8 gigabit. This is the XMP spec it has. It's a Viper Steel kit from Patriot. And yeah, that's basically all you need to know about this kit. So instead of setting it to 3600, we are going to 3800, while tightening down the primary. So you can see we tightened down cast latency by once. We kept TRCD, and I forgot the name of this one, and I also forgot the name of this one that we tightened down more. So we are at 3800. As said before, I was able to post all the way to here, but basically at 3866 and then going forward you have to loosen out your primaries a lot. So much that on paper it would actually lose your performance. So I stuck with 3800, which actually coincidentally is like perfect for Ryzen 5000 series. So yeah, 3800 and then just the same timings you saw here. So you can see I didn't bother with any of these yet. But yeah, I did primaries and subtimings. 1T command rate still doesn't work on this, though. This board is so much better for memory overclocking. Not that it like works significantly better. This is still Coffee Lake, and Coffee Lake is still not that great compared to the newer DDR4 platforms that we have. But when you put something in that won't post on this, it will not boot loop. That's like the thing I like. It will not boot loop. It will just tell you, oh hey, overclock failed. What do you want to do? Like go into BIOS or load defaults and go into BIOS, or like load your one of your profiles and boot. So yeah, that's really nice. Also, the lack of the postcode on this board, not that bad. Like I have the debug LEDs, and it is just really, really fast at posting and recovering. So you don't really end up needing the postcode anyway. Which meant it still would be a nice to have a postcode, but like it's not that you absolutely need it. Like you do on the Gigabyte board, like when it boot loops, you see it from the postcode, like it keeps doing the same thing, and then you know, okay, it's not memory training, it's just boot looping. I need to reset CMOS now. Yeah. So anyway, so TCL16, TRCD19, TRP19, TRS28. TRFC 480, I can maybe get 5 more clocks out of that, but like 470 was stable at 3700, so I just went to 480 at 3800 and called it a day. It's stable, I tested this, so there we are. And also like lowering this by 5 is not gonna have that big of a performance impact anyway, I think. So yeah, so TREFI, just maxing that out. Also, it has this nice explanation right here. Yeah, so basically, yeah, the amount of timings between it sending refresh commands, and basically refresh commands take up time that you could be using to fetch data. So maxing this out will give you better performance. However, it's not always stable, because like if the cells in your RAM can't hold the charge for this long, you need to refresh them sooner. But for my kit, I can just max this out. And then just all the subtimings. I don't really... Yeah, that's like the thing. This video might make me look like I know my things about DDR4. I don't. I just went in here and lowered everything as low as I think it will go. There's a lot of subtimings here that potentially still could go lower. But I don't really feel like spending any more time on this, and the performance, as you saw by IDA64, is already pretty good. In terms of like in Firestrike physics test, with the CPU at 5.2, this gives me just over 23,000 points, which is about 700, 800 points higher than what I previously had with the old board, old overclock, and CPU. I don't know if it was 5.1 or 5.2. The CPU at 5.2 compared to 5.1 is worth about 300 points, I think. So yeah, but the subtimings that I care about are the RRDs, these two, and T4. So this is the same set as I had on the old board. This doesn't go to 4. It will not work at 4, but this goes to 4, and T4 goes to 16. So the optimal setup for performance for this is both of these at 4 and this at 16. So this is slightly too high for optimal performance, but this is still much better than like any XMP spec is gonna allow you to. Like, actually I think MSI just ignores subtiming XMP. I think Asus does too. I think Gigabyte and ASRock read the XMP spec for your subtimings, and it tends to be like this at like 30 or something, and then these at like 16. Like, Buildzoid made a video about it. He actually had a kit that at XMP was slower than at JDAC because of this. So yeah, these are like the subtimings that I know are very important, and I always try to tweak first. And then there's just all the other timings. Also these two, they don't show up in ASRock timing configurator, and I don't think they exist on AMD, so I don't really... Well, I guess I could just go with the strategy of tighten them down until unstable, but yeah. As I said, I don't really feel like spending any more time on it anytime. Yeah, like, yeah. It performs well enough for me right now. I might revisit this later. I basically did this just to test how good this board is at memory overclocking, or just like, well, I guess I'm worse at memory overclocking than the board, so I guess just how pleasant it is to overclock. Yeah, also DRAM voltage 1.45, because this is CJR. You shouldn't go higher than 1.45 because it will roll over and also die. Yeah, and then for the CPU, I mean, 5.2 cores, 4.9 ring ratio, 1.42 vCore, which actually, that's one thing I have to say. So look at this. It's red at 1.36. So MSI goes like at 1.36. It like indirectly warns you that, oh my god, your voltage is too high. That's not. Like, okay, if you have bad cooling like 1.4, and then I think if you have good cooling, which I don't know how this passes, but this is custom water cooling. I would say this is very good cooling. I would potentially go up to 1.45. Thing is, just already at this voltage, the CPU does go into thermal throttling if I run anything that's not Fire Strike on it. Actually, it even does thermal throttle on one core in Fire Strike, because this is an 8700K, it's not soldered, and I haven't deleted it. So, yeah. And then this submenu I really like, because look at all those load line calibrations. Gigabyte had like 3. Also, it gives you this... No, can you please go? So it gives you this really nice graph of what you should expect these LLC modes to do. So basically mode 4 is like flat, right in the middle. I haven't really tested any other LLC modes yet, but yeah, it's in the middle. And from what I remember, just for MSI, I would just go for the middle setting. And it works fine, because I'm using the exact same voltages I put in on the Gigabyte board, and yeah, it's stable. I might even be able to lower the voltages slightly. And then also we have switching frequency settings, for example. We can also turn off VRM over temperature protection, which I wouldn't do on this board. But yeah, like you can set a bunch of things here that I don't think the Gigabyte board allowed you to. So this is like our switching frequency and all the load line settings. I think that's like, I think MSI did this on a lot of boards. So yeah, nice to see that this board has it too. And this is like not the top end board that MSI had, but it's like, just look at the VRM. It's not phenomenal, but like it's okay for what I want to do with it. Also, what does... Okay, this shows like a few more options. Okay. Yeah. Also, I have no idea what this game boost does. Oh wow! It just sets a 4.8 oil core. Wow, probably at like 1.45 volts. Yeah. So that's the MSI BIOS. I like the MSI BIOS. Probably, I can't say really. I think it's still a bit more accessible than the new Gigabyte BIOS. However, it's not that big of a difference. Also, the only instance where I had the new Gigabyte BIOS is on an AMD board, which might just have platform differences to this Intel board right here. But like, basically, I think this is on par with the new Gigabyte BIOS. And both of these are better than the old Gigabyte BIOS. And I haven't really worked with anyone else's BIOS. Like, I have a couple Asus boards, but they are like really old. They still have that like blue grayish BIOS, not the UEFI thing that you get today. So I can't really say how good I like Asus. But yeah, so that's the CJR memory overclock here. Which, yeah, this was a fairly painless experience. There was not a single boot loop in all of this. It just, you put the settings in and you post, and then you run test mem, and it's either stable or not stable, and then when you put in something that's really, really bad and doesn't post at all, it like recovers instantly and tells you about it, and not goes like the Gigabyte one, oh, I got a boot loop first, and now you have to reset CMOS, now your settings are gone. Hopefully you save the profile, lol. So, yeah. If I ever get my hands on a new memory kit, like I was considering to get the also Viper Steel 4400 CL19 B-Die kit. I saw that for under 100 euros not that long ago. I might go for that. So we might get some B-Die into this. Then I'll of course do my overclocking. Memory overclocking, that is. Until then, yeah, I think I will concentrate on doing what I always do, which is graphics cards. So right now you can see I just have the test card. Oh, one last thing that I just really have to show off. It's nothing spectacular, but it just... You see that? You see that? 16 lanes. All of them. Also at 2.0 speed. I don't know, like the old board was never able to run 2.0, it always ran 1.1. I don't know what the difference is. But the official spec for these cards says 2.0 and it's showing 2.0, so I guess it's better than 1.1. Yeah, so graphics card in slot. And we have all the PCI Express lanes. I know it's not... It's like expected to have that working, but the old board didn't do that. And it's the same card, so here's your proof that it's not the graphics card that's causing a problem, because this is, like, I didn't do a remount for this. Now for what I actually wanted to show off. So basically you can see here's the phase change unit that I have that still has an R9 to 80 attached to it. I pre-tested this. This has a pretty nasty cold boot bug, and also it doesn't scale with code at all. I think there's something kind of wrong with the card, so I won't be running it soon. I think the next card is actually this 7950 over here, which you can see is already insulated. I did some pre-testing yesterday. That might go on the phase change next, because this card, like, for some reason it just won't clock over 1315 megahertz, no matter if at ambient or sub-zero. Which is kind of strange, because this is a 28 nanometer card. This should scale like mad, but it just doesn't, neither with cold nor with voltage. It just stops at 1315, and also it has the very nasty cold boot bug, which I went back and checked. So this being an R9 to 80 is essentially a 7950 at slightly newer, and Buildzoid ran his 7950 on dry ice, and he didn't have to modify any PEX rel, and didn't... I don't think he had any cold boot or normal cold bugs with it. So I shouldn't be expecting this card to have it, but for some reason, like, the card runs fine, but as soon as you crash and have to restart the system, it will only boot at -17 or warmer. Which basically means you have to warm it up basically all the way. Which is really, really annoying with this thing, so I didn't really get anything done. Also, the LPDA memory on it scales negatively with cold. It became worse compared to ambient. So I might still rerun the card later, but like, so far this has not been that great. I will be trying the 7950 that you see here, with the water block still on it. Yeah, I don't know what other cards I'm gonna run next. Maybe another GTX. I have a 580 Lightning that I could run. I also have a GTX 280 that I could run. I have a bunch of GTX 480s that I could run. I guess one of those I'm gonna run. Then I still have that 780E power that I need to finish. I have a 680 classified that I could run, just have to figure out how to cool the VRM. Then I have a couple 560s, 460s, a 797, several 7970s actually. Like, I have a bunch of cards that I could run. I just need to prep those cards, like put the needed volt mods on them, insulate them, do some pre-testing. But yeah, now I have the new motherboard and it actually just works. Again, the main reason why I got this motherboard is not like the memory overclocking, though better memory overclocking is a nice to have. I got this motherboard because I wanted to have PCI Express slots that work, and this one does. Like, I just shoved two GTX 480s on it and ran some SLI benchmarks with these two, and they work fine. All the PCI Express lanes just instantly work without any remounting, and that's exactly what I like to see, because that should be standard. Yeah. So the video is getting kind of long now. Yeah, I think that's basically everything I wanted to show off. So this is the MPG Z390 Gaming Pro Carbon, and that's the MSI code for it. That's kind of in action. Yeah, so I like this board. I like. Yeah, like if it was like, I don't know, when did Z390 come out? Like 2019? Like, if it was 2019 and I just got myself like a 9700K or an 8700K for cheap, I really would have liked this board. Like, I really would have liked this board as like a budget overclocking option. Because like this is one of their cheaper boards. As you can see by the lack of features on it. And also the VRM. But yeah, so this board is quite capable. I like this board. And also the BIOS and just generally everything about it. So, yeah. So, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and until next time, goodbye.